In a morgue, if a small child declared dead suddenly opened his eyes, what would you do? This story tells of an incredible miracle witnessed by a nurse as she faced the pain of losing her son. Close your eyes and let yourself be drawn into the depths of the story. A nurse prepares the body of a child who was declared dead, but he opens his eyes and she panics. The glove snaps as she pulls on the wrist. The plastic rubs against the skin and makes a sharp sound. She slowly brings her hand to the child's chest, as if the air could break. She touches it with 2 fingertips. She expects to feel cold, but it feels warm. Why is it still warm? She lets out a low, almost voiceless cry. She doesn't move. For a second, the air conditioning blows directly on the back of her neck. Very cold. The ceiling light is white, strong, without compassion. The steel table bites the back of her hand that rests on it. The smell is of alcohol, dry serum, clean rag. She breathes short, feels her own breath collide with the mask and return hot. Calm down. Do what you have to do, she tells herself very quietly. Her fingers return to the child's skin, first the tip, then the back of the hand, like when you check if someone has a fever. Surprisingly, it is warm again. It is not hot. It is not cold. It is in between. It should not be like this. Why do you swallow? Why is it still warm? The silence in the room seems to hear only the air blowing, only the warm skin. She closes her eyes for a moment, opens them again. The protocol must begin. She pulls the supply cart with her hip. The wheels complain with a low squeak. She opens the first drawer. Gauze, cotton, swabs, everything neat and tidy, everything in its place. She takes a metal tray, places it on the table, and fills it with a little tap water. The water runs, sounding like a thread. She tests it with her warm wrist. It's also what there is. She turns off the tap and returns to the child. The light falls on his pale little face and draws the shadows of his eyelashes. She adjusts the sheet, covering his chest more, leaving only what is necessary. She does it carefully, as if the fabric could hurt. Sorry, she says simply, as if talking to someone who is asleep. I'll be gentle. She takes a swab, wets it, squeezes it with both hands. The dripping falls onto the tray. Tick, tick, tick. She cleans his forehead from top to bottom, removes a trace of dried serum, cleans his cheeks, his chin, the line of his neck. The warm fabric touches the warm skin, and for a second, everything seems alive, but it is not. It is just care that's better. She lets out a short sigh that trembles at the end. Her hands remain steady. She removes a bandage. She pulls it calmly so as not to damage the thin skin. She applies cotton wool. She adjusts the sheet again. The metal of the stretcher brings the cold back to her fingertips, and she feels the contrast again. The cold table, the skin still warm. She shouldn't. The sentence doesn't end. She bites her lip. Concentrate, Clara. Concentrate. She goes to the closet, takes out the clean clothes, light fabric, smelling of new soap. She opens the folds, one by one, with the palm of her hand, as if removing wrinkles from an old dress. She returns. I'm going to change your clothes. Yes, slowly, without rushing. She unties the knot of the hospital gown, a small, poorly made bow. Her fingers work patiently. With patience, there's no rush. There can't be. She slides the fabric over his shoulders, lifts one arm, then the other with a strength that is almost no strength at all, just technique. She supports the child's elbow in her own hand, holds his wrist carefully. The skin yields softly. Only the slight sound of the fabric rubbing against the skin. She folds the used gown, aligns it neatly, puts it in a bag to be thrown away, takes the clean clothes, puts them on top, guides the arms through the sleeves, adjusts the shoulders, pulls the fabric and smooths it out. Everything gently, everything in its own time. She looks around, trying to distract herself with the technicalities. Checks the label on the wrist without reading it aloud. checks if anything is missing from the tray. Alcohol, cotton, gauze. Everything is fine. She returns to her slow care, moistens another swab, cleans the child's hands finger by finger, as if learning piano again. Thumb, index, middle, ring little finger between her fingers, a little ink from a pen, a mark from a child who draws and forgets to wash her. She rubs gently, and the ink gradually disappears. The small hand is clean. Lisa ready not to grab anything clear. She feels a knot in her chest. She stands still for a second, silent, just breathing. "I'm here," she says simply. "I'm going to do it." "Right." She wipes with a dry cloth, removes the moisture, smooths the child's hair, runs her fingers through that fell on his forehead. She smooths the sheet again, unhurriedly straightens the pillow, feels the weight of the air, the weight of the finality, but the question still bothers her. She returns because it is still warm. She looks at her own hand, a slight tremor. She takes a step back, another forward, back again. She rests her fingertips on the child's chest again, without force, just a warm touch. She closes her hand as if she wants to keep that warmth inside from her fingers. She can't. She opens her eyes. She repeats the gesture 3 times to be sure of what she feels and what she doesn't want to feel. She adjusts the collar of the new clothes, checks the seams, and calmly buttons them up. 1, 2, 3. Each click is a command that brings order to the chaos inside. She cleans the skin near the neck again. It is dry and smells of soap and alcohol. She pulls the sheet up to his chest. She smooths out the wrinkles and leaves her hand on top. Just a moment, and you're all tidied up. The air is still cold. The room is still very bright. The supply cart is silent in the bright corner. She straightens her shoulders, fills the tray again, prepares more swabs, separates. What is missing? Begins the protocol, as she was taught, calmly, carefully, respectfully. One gesture, then another, without skipping steps, without rushing, without running away from what needs to be done. She pulled out the clear bag where the child's things were. It was part of the protocol. Collect, record, separate everything. Cold, mechanical. But when she opened the zipper, the air seemed to stop inside. Among a pair of worn sandals, a t-shirt smelling of cheap soap, and a notebook with folded corners, there was a small blue plastic car with scratched paint and peeling wheels. A simple toy, one of those that cost little but hold a lot. Clara slowly reached out her hand and touched the cart with her fingertip, as if she were afraid of breaking it. She ran her finger along the deep scratch that crossed the toy's body. Her fingernail scraped the plastic, and then she sighed. My God. Her chest felt heavy. The air became short. In that instant, it was no longer just an object inside a bag of belongings. It was not just a toy belonging to a child who had left too soon for Clara. That cart pulled at an old thread that she swore she had stored deep in her memory. She closed her eyes for a second and saw a room full of clutter, toy cars scattered on the floor, the laughter of a child running back and forth, and herself shouting, "Be careful, Gabriel! You're going to trip." The memory cut like a knife. Gabriel, the son she lost years ago, the same way of playing, the same blue toy car. She opened her eyes quickly, trying to protect herself from the memory, but the toy was there firmly in her hand, as if it had been taken from her own home. "No, it can't be," she murmured, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked hard, trying to hold them back. The hospital was no place to break down. Every tear seemed forbidden, but the lump in her throat would not obey. She ran her thumb over the line on the stroller again, slowly, as if caressing an open wound. The plastic was worn, but strong, just like the one Gabriel had. She remembered every detail, the wheels that sometimes got stuck, her son's habit of running the stroller along the wall, making engine noises with his mouth. Broom, broom, she murmured almost without meaning to. repeating the sound her son made, and the silence of the room echoed that sound back to her like a painful echo. Clara pressed the stroller against her chest over her gown and felt her own heart beating fast, searching for a rhythm between the past and the present. Why this? The question came out, but there was no answer. Her hands were shaking. Part of her wanted to put the toy back in the bag, close it, and pretend she hadn't seen it, but another part couldn't let it go. The toy car seemed stuck to her, as if it carried a memory that refused to be forgotten, even though it hurt so much. She took a deep breath, but the air failed her. A sob came out dry. Quickly, before she could swallow it, she turned to look again at the child on the stretcher, small and still, with pale skin under the white light. But that stroller told a story, a vivid childhood, made of games, scratched floors, little hands grabbing a toy as if it were a treasure. Clara rested her free hand on the edge of the table, trying to steady her trembling legs. "You had a toy car like that too, right, Miguel?" Clara said quietly, as if the child could hear. Silence answered, but Clara continued to look at the toy, lost in the weight of everything she was feeling. It was just a blue toy car, nothing more. But for her it was a door to a pain that never went away, a pain that now returned completely without warning. She closed her eyes again and let the memory come, the day she put Gabriel's toy car in a box at the back of the closet, swearing she would never see it again. Her heart broken into pieces, her hands trembling, certain that she would not have the strength to face that again. And yet there it was, the same toy, the same color, the same scratch on the plastic. Clara slowly opened her eyes. The blue toy car was still in her hand. She couldn't let it go. She whispered in a low, trembling voice, "Why does this toy car move me so much inside?" The room was too quiet. All she could hear the cold air from the air conditioner and the distant noise of the wheels of a stretcher in the hallway. Clara was arranging the sheet over the child's body when she accidentally looked up at the wall. The round clock with a faded white frame had stopped. The hands were stuck between 3 and 4, 03:17 a.m. Clara blinked and moved a little closer, frowning. The second hand wasn't moving either. It seemed frozen. She looked around. No one else had noticed. The other workers hurried past the door, pushing carts and murmuring about medicines and tests. Normal hospital life. But there, in that room, time had stopped. Clara took off her gloves for a moment, rubbed her eyes with her fingertips, and looked again. It wasn't her imagination. The clock was dead. She took another step, as if that mattered, as if the hands held some secret. 03:17, Anne, she murmured. The sound of her own voice sounded strange, heavy, as if she shouldn't be speaking there. She tried to remember what she was doing at that moment, where she was. Was it when they told her about the death, or when she signed the paper? A chill ran down her spine. How strange, very strange. The silence grew thicker. She looked at the child on the stretcher, then at the clock, and felt as if the two were connected in some way. It didn't make sense. Her hands were sweating inside her new pair of gloves. She pressed the plastic against her palm, trying to refocus, but her eyes kept looking at that clock, stuck at 03:17. It was as if time had stopped right there, frozen along with the child's life. She took a deep breath, but the air came out short, almost like a sigh of fear. She carefully pulled the sheet to adjust the child's body. The heavy fabric slid, and in that movement something fell next to the stretcher, sliding onto the cold floor. It was a small piece of paper, all crumpled, almost hidden. She bent down slowly, her knees trembling, and picked up the little piece of paper with her fingertips. She opened it carefully, afraid of tearing it. The folds were marked as if it had been kept in a pocket for a long time. In the middle of the sheet, written in faint blue pen, there was only one sentence: "Please come back." The handwriting was shaky, childish, poorly done, like someone who is still learning to write. Clara swallowed hard and ran her finger over the words as if she wanted to feel the weight of what they said. "Please come back. Who is Elle?" she whispered to herself. Silence answered her. She closed her eyes for a moment. The sentence was short, but it hurt a lot. It didn't sound like a request, but like a cry trapped on paper, a child's plea to someone who left too soon. Clara pressed the little piece of paper in her hand against her chest and felt her heart beating fast, as if it wanted to respond to that call without realizing it. Her throat closed up. The memory of her lost son came back suddenly, without warning, and with that memory came a song, without Clara even looking for it. A simple lullaby with only 2 repeating notes, the one she used every night to calm Gabriel. Her voice came out low and trembling, as if it were going to break at any moment. "Sleep, my angel. Sleep slowly." The melody filled the room cold, breaking the heavy silence. She tried to keep singing, but her voice broke in the middle of the verse. A tear fell beneath her mask, wetting the fabric. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice broken. She took a deep breath, but the song returned on its own, as if it did not come from her, but from something greater. Each word brought back the smell of Gabriel's room, the soft sound of his breathing, the warmth of a body she once cradled in her arms. She sang softly, almost crying, and the crumpled paper remained in her hand as if it were a message for that moment, as if that phrase had found the right place to be read. The sound of the song and the weight of those words mingled in the air, clear but broken inside. She just let the song continue, even though her voice failed, even though the tears fell. The paper said, "Please come back," and her heart in the asked for the same thing. The scalpel was in her hand, aligned with the light. It was only to cut a sticky tape, nothing more. The metal glinted for a second. The tip touched the Band-Aid, and suddenly, the world stopped. The child's fingers moved. It wasn't much, just a tiny tremor, like the startle of someone who dreams and wakes up halfway through. The scalpel froze in the air, and Clara's hand also without air. She couldn't breathe. Her heart beat so hard that she could feel it in her ears. "No, it can't be," she said softly, as if speaking loudly would break something. The air conditioning blew colder air, and a chill ran up the back of her neck. Clara opened her eyes wide, hoping it was an illusion, a reflection, the imagination of someone who was tired. But the child's fingers trembled again, just a little, just enough to remove any doubt. Miguel, the name came out scratchy. The scalpel slipped from her fingers and fell onto the tray with a sharp metallic clang that echoed throughout the room. Clara took 2 steps back, her back bumping into the furniture. Her body wanted to flee, but her soul wanted to get closer. She moved forward, approaching him with her hands outstretched, not knowing where to touch. His skin was still warm. His eyelashes trembled like grass in the wind, and then his eyelids opened slowly, heavy, like someone returning from far away who needs to remember how to look at himself. His eyes opened first in a line, then a little more, dark pupils unfocused, trying to find something in the air. His eyes didn't know where to stop, moving between light and shadow, and she whispered, "Hey, hey, calm down," swallowing the tears that suddenly welled up. "It's me. Everything's fine. Everything's fine." But it wasn't. His chest was beating fast. Everything was disordered. His legs seemed to have no knees. His hand trembled so much that he hid it under the sheet, as if hiding a secret. "Miguel, can you hear me?" Her voice broke. "Blink if you can hear me. Blink." He didn't blink because he was asked to. He blinked as if learning again. Heavy, slow, one side before the other. His gaze coming and going, lost like a fish out of water, searching for its first breath. She felt a heat rising from her stomach to her face. The silence became thick. The light from the ceiling hurt her eyes. Everything seemed far away and close at the same time. She took a step back again. Her body demanded distance. Her head pushed her forward again. She moved closer, almost pressing her face against his so that those eyes would have a place to stay. "Stay with, please," she said softly, with a tremor that broke each word. Her fingers found the red button next to the stretcher, The alarm stuck to the wall like a sleeping guard. The tip of her glove brushed the plastic for a second. She hesitated, then pressed it hard. The sound exploded, sharp, short, repeated, cutting through the room, the hallways, her chest, an alarm that said without saying, "Come now." Clara took her hand off the button and ran. The door hit the frame. The hallway opened wide, the floor shining empty of help. She opened her mouth and shouted what needed to come out. Code in the preparation room, and her voice exploded loudly above the rapid fear. He opened his eyes. The echo of the word code ran down the hallway as if it had legs. Clara turned around, almost slipping on the smooth floor, and ran back to the room, her heart racing, the sound of the alarm marking the time that had previously stopped. Everyone seemed to be there. The stretcher, the clock stopped, but the child with his eyes open, and her gasping, ready for whatever came. In the next second, the sound of the alarm still bounced off the walls of the hallway and returned to the room like a scream that never ended. Clara rested. She rested both hands on the edge of the stretcher, her chest rising and falling very quickly, almost without air. The child's eyes were open, lost, trying to hold on to life with a thread inside him. Time became mixed up. It wasn't just Miguel in front of her. It was also Gabriel, the son who never grew up, the child she saw leave too soon. His face was different, but the same emptiness in his eyes, the same silence. And then, inside the bag of things in the corner, the memory flashed like a knife, the light blue stroller. She clenched her teeth. That toy seemed to look at her as if asking for an answer she could never give. She remembered the day she put her son's stroller in a cardboard box, hiding it at the back of the closet. She remembered the feeling of failure, of not having managed to keep the child in the world. The stroller stayed there like a weight, like a wound that never closed. Now, in front of her, another child was on the edge of the same abyss. "I'm not going to lose another one," she said softly but firmly. Her body changed in that moment. The old pain turned into strength. Her heart raced, became fuel. Her arms trembled less. Her eyes filled with tears, but behind them there was fire. She looked at Miguel again, his mouth slightly open, his breath weak, almost invisible. "You're not going anywhere," she whispered in the child's ear, as if he could understand. "Not while I'm here." She took his little hand and squeezed it between her cold gloves. She felt the warmth still hidden there, and that was enough. Inside, fear screamed, but above the fear, there was something else, something bigger. It was as if the memory of her lost son had ignited a silent promise within her. This time, she wasn't going to let go. She took a deep breath, pulling the air in forcefully, like someone diving to the bottom of the water, and stood up straight in front of the stretcher. The alarm continued to sound, calling for help, but until someone arrived, she knew it was just her and the child, just the two of them. And deep in her chest, her voice repeated firmly like a mantra, like a prayer. "I'm not going to lose another one. I'm not going to lose another one. I'm not going to lose another one." The door opened with a bang, hitting the wall. Dr. Alvaro rushed in, his gown slightly wrinkled, with a hard expression like someone who has seen too much to believe in anything. The alarm was still sounding in the hallways, but inside the room there was only that heavy silence filled with waiting. He glanced quickly at the stretcher, at Clara with her gloves on, bent over the child. He didn't approach immediately. He stood with his arms crossed, as if the simple act of keeping his distance was a way to control the situation. Clara's voice was firm, almost impatient. "He's been pronounced dead." Clara slowly raised her eyes. They were red, filled with tears, but steady. She was no longer afraid of him. She blinked. Dr. Alvaro frowned and shook his head as if rejecting an absurd idea. "Muscle spasm. You know that, Clara." She squeezed the child's hand on the sheet and felt that hidden warmth again. She didn't let go. "No, doctor. I saw it." She blinked and moved her fingers. He's here." Silence exploded between them. The alarm was still going, but it sounded distant, muffled. The room was filled with a tension that could be cut with a knife. Alvaro looked away quickly, as if he didn't want to face something. He went to the table and touched some instruments unnecessarily, just so he wouldn't have to look directly at Clara or the child. Clara noticed. "Why don't you check the file, Doctor?" The question came out dry, blunt. Alvaro stopped touching things, his fingers frozen on the metal tray. He didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, his shoulders heavy. Clara insisted, her voice lower now but firm. "There's something you don't want to see, isn't there?" He closed his eyes for a second, as if keeping a secret, but he said nothing. He just stood there, breathing deeply, his jaw clenched. The room suddenly seemed smaller. The ticking that didn't exist from a stopped clock could be heard in the silence. Clara didn't take her eyes off him. He blinked. "Doctor," she repeated with a mixture of hope and pain. "Don't ask me to pretend I didn't see it." The silence remained thick and suffocating. Only Alvaro's eyes, red with fatigue, said something that his mouth still did not dare to say. Clara leaned over the stretcher. Her heart was beating so hard that it was difficult to hear. She carefully held the child's face and brought her ear close to his mouth. She stood there motionless, as if the world had stopped. "There's air," she whispered. She waited. She felt a very faint breath, almost nothing, so fragile that it could seem like imagination, but it was not there. A hidden thread of life in the silence. "My God." She closed her eyes tightly, trying not to cry. She turned quickly with a firmness she didn't know she had. "Ambu." Now her voice came out loud and authoritative, leaving no room for doubt. A frightened assistant ran to get the emergency equipment and brought it back in a hurry, almost knocking everything over on the way. Clara didn't wait. She took it in her own hands, assembled it in seconds, and connected it as if she did it every day. "Hold it tight here," she said to the boy, pointing to the mask. "Close it tightly, so the air doesn't escape." He obeyed without asking questions. Clara placed the ambu bag and began to squeeze the balloon rhythmically, watching the child's chest with each squeeze. She hoped he would rise. At first, nothing happened. Then there was a small, minimal movement, but it ignited hope inside her like fire. "Come on, champ, breathe with me. Come on." Her voice trembled, but it was also an order. Dr. Alvaro approached, serious, his eyes fixed on the blank monitor. He said nothing, just watched, torn between disbelief and fear. Clara didn't look at him. She continued at a steady pace without stopping. The air entered his chest and rose a little more, as if Miguel were slowly remembering how to breathe. In the midst of the tension, the question came out dry, almost like a cry from within. "Where's your mom?" A heavy silence fell. The assistant looked around, lost, and replied, "I don't know. They said they called, but no one has arrived." Clara opened her eyes in surprise. How could no one have arrived? That child is not alone in the world. Her voice cut through the air in the room. The boy shrugged his shoulders as if apologizing. "They just said they called, but nothing so far." Clara felt her stomach tighten. She squeezed the ambu bag again with force, as if she wanted to push life into him with her own hands. "Where are you, Mama?" she murmured, looking at the child. "Where are you?" The room returned to silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of air entering the child's chest as he tried to respond, and by the glaring absence of his mother, who still hadn't arrived. The sound of air entering the ambu bag sounded like a desperate beat. Clara's eyes were fixed on the child. She didn't look away for a second. His chest rose slowly, as if he were still struggling to remember the path of life. Suddenly, something caught her attention. The monitor, which until then had been off, lit up with a faint, trembling line, as if awakening from a deep sleep. Clara's eyes widened. It couldn't be. The digital needle flashed, and the number slowly appeared, 03:17 a.m. At that very moment, A wave of cold ran through her body. It was the same time as the clock hanging on the wall, the same minute that seemed frozen in time, now suddenly marked in the child's heart. It was at that minute, she murmured in a choked voice. It was at 03:17 a.m. He tried to return. The line on the monitor was very faint, almost disappearing, but it was still there. A signal, a plea, a clear spark. She squeezed the ambu bag harder, as if answering him. "I'm here. Come back to me." The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic sound of air and the faint beeping that could be heard from time to time, like sighs. At that moment, Alvaro spoke. His voice was no longer firm. It was low and heavy, as if he were hiding something. He nodded and led her into the hallway. She hesitated for a second, her gaze fixed on the child, but then she handed the ambu bag to the assistant and went out into the hallway. It was empty, illuminated by the strong white light of the spotlights. The echo of her footsteps sounded louder than normal. Alvaro leaned against the wall, crossed his arms, and lowered his gaze. His gaze. It took him a few seconds to speak. When he did, his voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. The cause was not clear. Clara frowned. "What do you mean, no?" He took a deep breath and wiped his sweaty forehead. "I had my doubts." Her eyes began to burn. "Doubts? You signed the death certificate, Alvaro." He looked at her for just a second, but then looked back at the floor. "I avoided reading the file again because I thought maybe I was wrong." The word wrong hung in the air, heavy, as if cutting the space between them. Clara took a step toward him, breathing heavily. "My God!" Alvaro closed his eyes tightly, his voice also breaking. "I'm not sure. I really didn't have a chance. I gave up too soon." The entire hallway was filled with an unbearable, thick silence. Clara felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of anger and pain. But behind all that, one phrase kept running through her head. It was 03:17 a.m. Her heart tried to return. Clara's chest tightened, her eyes still burning from Alvaro's words. The sound of air entering through the ambu bag, the faint beeping of the monitor, all mixed together, formed a strange rhythm, as if each noise pushed a little bit of hope and a little bit of fear at the same time. She approached the stretcher, placed her hand on Miguel's forehead, and closed her eyes for a moment. She felt his skin was warm enough to know it wasn't the end, warm enough to keep trying, and without thinking, the melody came back, the same one as before, the simple little song with low notes that she sang to her son to put him to sleep. She didn't rehearse it. She didn't think about it. It just came out, trembling, almost broken. "Sleep, my angel, sleep slowly." Her voice broke in the middle, as if each word came from memory, but she continued singing. The melody filled the cold room, mingling with the beeping of the monitor and the sigh of the ambu bag. Clara leaned closer to the child's face, singing close to his ear. "Everything is fine. I'm here. So rest, rest." And that's when she saw it. Miguel's lips moved so slowly that it seemed unreal. First a small tremor, then a gentle movement, as if he were trying to repeat the words he heard. Clara's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. He hears her voice. It came out broken but full of certainty. He hears. She looked at the assistant beside her, who said nothing, his eyes also filled with tears. Miguel moved his lips again, almost imperceptibly, as if the song were a thread pulling him back, reminding him of the way, telling him to stay, not to go. Clara didn't stop. She kept singing, now louder, even though her voice failed him. Each verse came out full of tears that could not flow, each note with the nostalgia of the son who had left and the hope of the child who could still stay. The song seemed to fill the entire room, breaking the weight of the white walls, reaching a place that no machine could reach. Clara, looking at Miguel, could not help but ask the silent question that burned inside her. Why does this song touch her so deeply? The echo of the song, mixed with the slight movement of the child's mouth, left the entire room with the feeling that something invisible was happening there, something bigger than anyone could understand. Clara was arranging the sheet on Miguel's arm when something colorful caught her attention. A small piece of pink plastic hidden among his things that she hadn't seen. She pulled it out slowly and saw a children's party bracelet, the kind they give you when you enter a birthday party room. The name was written in permanent marker, the letters crooked and too big to fit properly. Lara. Clara stopped and read it again, feeling her heart beat fast. It was clearly a girl's handwriting, written quickly and hurriedly. At that moment, she remembered the piece of paper she had found earlier. "Come back, please, Ele." Her eyes filled with tears. So that's Ele. That's Lara, her sister. She looked at Miguel, still and fragile, breathing with assistance, and the image formed in her head. Two children at a party, the sound of balloons popping, colorful cake, loud music. Then something went wrong, very wrong, and the boy ended up there on that cold stretcher with the bracelet still on his wrist as a reminder of a day that should have been nothing but joy. Clara ran her fingers gently over the bracelet. The plastic was worn, half broken, but still firm. "You went to your sister's party, didn't you, Miguel?" she whispered, her voice breaking. It was supposed to be a happy day. Tears ran down under her mask. She tried to wipe them away, but the glove only spread the moisture. Suddenly, fear filled her insides, hitting her like a punch in the stomach, bringing back the memory of Gabrielle, the hospital, the wait, the moment she understood that there was nothing left to do. Clara's body was shaking all over. "And if he leaves again?" she said in a low voice, almost breathless. I can't take it." Her hands trembled. The ambu bag slipped a little. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe deeply, but her chest felt too heavy. It was then that she saw the bag with the things inside again, the light blue stroller. She walked towards it as if seeking refuge. She grabbed the toy with both hands and pressed it against her chest. The hard plastic hit her heart like a reminder. "Stay with me, Miguel," she whispered, looking at the child, but also talking to herself. "I'm not going to let go of your hand." The fear was still there, enormous, but now she had an anchor, and even the old, scratched blue stroller, just like her lost son's, a piece of pain that now became a clear force. She returned to the stretcher, with the stroller still in her hand, held her breath, dried her eyes, and steadied herself again. Even though she was trembling, even though she was broken inside, she knew she couldn't let Miguel go. She couldn't lose him again. Miguel's body looked so small, almost lost among the white sheets, as if he were just another number among many, but he wasn't, not to her. She took a deep breath, wiped the tear running down under her mask, and made her decision. "Let's warm him up," she said firmly, almost like an order. The assistant looked at her confused, waiting for someone else to say yes. Dr. Alvaro frowned and crossed his arms, hesitating. Clara began in a harsh voice. "That's not in the protocol." She looked at him with eyes full of tears, but with fire inside. "The protocol doesn't breathe, doctor, but he does." The silence became heavy. Alvaro held her gaze for a few seconds, but then looked away. He ran his hand over his forehead and sighed heavily, like someone who is no longer sure of anything. Clara didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed the first blanket from the shelf, shook it, and put it over Miguel. Then she took another and another. It wasn't just to cover him. She opened her hands and began to rub his arms with quick, firm pressure, trying to get the blood moving again. "Come on, kid, react with me," she murmured softly, as if talking to her own son. The assistant hesitated, but seeing Clara's determination, he did the same. He rubbed his legs over the sheet, trying to generate heat. The room, which had been cold and mechanical before, now had human movement, hands insisting as if to say, "You are not alone." Clara lowered her face very close to Miguel's ear. Feel our hands, Miguel. Wake up. Come back." When she raised her head, She saw Alvaro standing in the corner, motionless, watching the scene. He seemed torn between the weight of logic on one side and hope on the other. "Doctor, help!" Clara shouted, her voice breaking. "Forget the manual. Just for a minute." Alvaro closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The image of the unfinished file came back to his mind, the memory of the moment when he gave up too soon, the words that still echoed in the hallway. "I had doubts in the end." He let go of his arms and approached, placing his hand on Miguel's chest with hesitation. Then, without saying anything else, he began to rub and along with them. Clara looked at him quickly and saw that although his face remained serious, Alvaro's eyes shone with something that was not common in him. "Try," he said softly, almost a whisper, but full of surrender. Clara's heart tightened with pain and fear, but also with hope, because at that moment, they were no longer against the manual. They were all together in favor of life. In the middle of the hallway, Clara could only hear the sound of the blankets being dragged by the hands, rubbing the ambu bag, filling and emptying. The room was hot with effort, hot with hope, but suddenly, a voice burst from outside, loud, crossing the hallway until it reached her. "His mother is on her way," shouted the receptionist. "The truck broke down on the way." Clara froze for a moment. His mother hadn't gotten lost. She hadn't abandoned him. She had been running the whole time, desperate to get there. Clara's heart ached deeply. She imagined the woman alone in the middle of the road, pounding on the steering wheel, begging for the engine to start, crying, afraid of losing her son without being able to see him one last time. "Hang in there, Miguel," Clara whispered in a low but firm voice. "Your mom is coming. She didn't give up on you." And it was at that moment that she felt it. The boy's hand, which until then had been limp and motionless, squeezed her finger. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but she felt it. Clara opened her eyes wide, the air trapped in her chest. "He squeezed," she said, with tears streaming down her face. "He hurt me." She leaned closer, pressing her face against Clara's. "I'm here, and she's coming. Your mom is coming, Miguel." A respectful silence filled the room, as if everyone knew they had just witnessed something greater than any explanation. Clara then remembered the song she had sung minutes before, the song that had come out of her mouth as if it were the only thing capable of reaching the child. And in that moment, like a breath of understanding, it dawned on her. It wasn't just her song, it was her mother's song. It was what Miguel listened to every day before going to sleep. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but this time there was a different sparkle in them. She lifted her face and looked up as if silently giving thanks. No words were necessary. The squeeze of the child's hand was the answer she needed. Alvaro was standing next to the stretcher, his hands clasped behind his back, his face serious, but his eyes restless. The monitor beeped softly, irregularly, and clearly. He kept his hands on the child, steady, as if holding on to life with his fingers. Suddenly, he broke the silence. It was a septic shock. His voice came out heavy, almost stuck, but there was a clear possibility. He turned slowly. "What is he saying?" He took a deep breath, looked at the floor, and only then raised his eyes, heavy with meaning. "I gave up too soon." The world stopped for a second. The room seemed smaller, clearer. She felt her blood boil. An old rage rose up along with the pain. How many times had she seen haste, carelessness, and exhaustion win out in a hospital? "You signed his death warrant. He said he might have been wrong, and now you tell me that." Her voice trembled, not only with pain, but with anger. Alvaro blinked several times, trying to hold back the moisture in his eyes. The tears were coming, but he wouldn't let them fall. "I thought that there was no way, that it was too late." He swallowed, his voice failing. "I failed," he thought, clenching his fists, his chest about to explode. He wanted to scream, to accuse him, but he stopped. He looked at the child, saw his lips moving weakly, saw his small body trying to respond to life. He took a deep breath and held back his own rage with all his strength, as if it were a beast trying to escape. She placed her hand firmly on Alvaro's shoulder, almost a push. Now is not the time for blame. Her eyes burned, but her voice came out determined. Now we fight. Alvaro closed his eyes and let his head fall forward a little. When he lifted it again, there was pain there, but also surrender. He nodded slowly, unable to speak, and at that moment they were no longer doctor and nurse discussing protocols. They were two human beings facing a life that still called to them, two hearts beating with fear, regret, and clear hope. She looked at Miguel again and repeated in a faint but firm voice, like a promise, "Now we fight." The door burst open as if without asking permission. Footsteps could be heard running down the hall. A woman entered, panting, her hair tied back hastily, her blouse wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. She stopped 2 steps from the door, searching with her eyes for an answer that did not come. She saw her son. She saw his half-open eyes with that faint glow that seems to come from sleep. "My God," her voice broke in the middle. "My God, my son." Her legs gave way, and the chair behind her slid across the floor, and she fell down, sitting with her hands over her face, trying to hide the tears that her body couldn't contain. She couldn't breathe properly. The air only came out in the form of sobs. Clara approached slowly, like someone bringing water to someone in the desert. She gently touched the woman's hand. "I'm Clara," she said softly, with the calmness of someone who has already endured a lot of pain. "He's here. Look at him. Breathe with me." Janaína slowly removed her hands from her face slowly. Her pupils searched for the child again. Her chest rose and fell quickly, without rhythm. "He hears me?" she asked, without the courage to get closer. "Come," said Clara, guiding her hand. "Touch him. Stay by his side." Janaína got up from the chair, as if she were afraid of breaking the floor. She approached the edge of the stretcher. Her trembling hand searched for her son's hand. She found it. It was small, warm, almost without strength, but it was his hand. She caressed his fingers one by one, as if counting them one by one each day, so as not to forget them. "Miguel, Mama is here," she said in a low, raspy voice, like someone speaking in desperation. Clara remained on the other side of the stretcher and looked into the mother's eyes with a mixture of firmness and sweetness. "Sing to him." Janaína blinked in confusion, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "What song?" "The lullaby, the one that is only for you two. Sing it. He knows your voice." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, took a breath of the air she had been missing, and let the melody flow. It was simple, old-fashioned, one of those you learn by listening to your grandmother. Her voice came out softly at first, trembling but sincere. "Sleep, my angel. Sleep slowly." The room, which had been nothing but machines and cold, changed temperature. Her voice filled the corners, slipped under the sheet, touched. The child's face joined in softly, marking the notes like a helping hand in the dark. "Sleep, my angel," she repeated softly, almost in a whisper, next to the machines. Alvaro remained silent. His steady hands adjusted what needed to be adjusted. He checked connections, regulated the flow, and straightened sensors that had moved slightly. He said nothing, just worked attentively with a care that was evident in the way he of touching the monitor. It flashed with a faint light. A number appeared and disappeared. Clara saw it out of the corner of her eye, but did not stop singing. Janaína, her forehead pressed against her son's, now sang with more breath, as if her body remembered only the path of the song. "Sleep, my angel. I am here, my love." The beep grew a little louder, still irregular, but alive. The line on the screen became less pale. The number steadied. 72. Janaína sobbed, but did not let the song fall. Her hand squeezed Miguel's softly, calling him. "It's me, son. I'm your mom. Stay with me." Clara kept the melody steady, rocking him, offering her shoulder with her voice. The air from the ambu bag went in, came out, went in again, and the child's chest responded with a clearer rise and fall. 78. Alvaro took a step back, looked at the screen, looked at the child, and readjusted his focus. There was a silence that respected the song. No harsh orders, just presence. "That's it," murmured Clara, without stopping singing. "That's it, Miguel. Listen to your mom. Come back for her voice." Janaína cried and sang at the same time, tears falling onto the sheet, her voice still broken with emotion, but full of love. The monitor responded again, the line drawing a deeper breath, the number rising to 84 for a second. No one said anything. No one made a sound. Only the music and the machines. It was as if the whole room had decided to breathe with him. Clara felt her skin tingle under her gown. Janaína rested her forehead on her son's hand and smiled, crying a smile that hurt and healed at the same time. "Sleep, my angel," she repeated firmly, like a promise. "Mommy is here." Clara kept her voice steady, holding the tone, giving ground. Alvaro was still there, attentive, watching every number, every light, without interrupting the outside world, which continued to run. But inside, for a moment, there were only 3 voices, and a heart learning to find its rhythm again. The room was suspended in time. Janaína's voice, the mother's, still lulled Miguel. Clara held the melody with a thread of her voice, and Alvaro silently followed the numbers that rose little by little on the monitor. The air seemed lighter, but no one dared to relax. It was as if every second was too precious to be distracted. Then there was a small but sharp click, loud enough to cut through the air. Everyone looked around in fear. Clara looked up and found the source. The wall clock had been stopped since the beginning, frozen at 03:17 a.m. Now, without anyone touching it, the second hand moved. First one jump, then another. 3:18. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The sound of the second hand returned to marking time steadily, filling the room with that tick-tock, tick-tock that seemed to bring back something forgotten. She stared, mesmerized, as the minute hand moved slowly forward to 03:18 a.m. A sigh escaped from behind her mask. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if giving thanks without having to speak. It was no coincidence. It couldn't be the minute when the clock stopped. It was the same minute Miguel's heart tried to return, the same minute that stubborn life asked to pass. She opened her eyes again and said nothing so as not to break the moment. She just let a discreet smile emerge from within, hidden but true, because now she knew that time had not stopped to mark death. It had stopped to save the moment when life decided to fight. The monitor remained steady. Miguel's chest rose and fell at a rhythm that gave both excitement and fear at the same time. Janaína did not let go of her son's hand, crying softly and saying words that only a mother understands. Clara remained silent, respecting the moment. It was then that Alvaro approached. His steps were slow and heavy, as if each one cost him more than his body could give. He stood next to the mother, but could not look her directly in the eyes. His hands trembled, hidden in the pockets of his robe. Janaína slowly lifted her face, surprised. Her eyes met his, tired and full of guilt. "I gave up too soon," Alvaro continued, swallowing hard. "If it weren't for them, your son," his voice broke, "your son wouldn't be here now." The silence that followed was heavy, but not cold. It was a silence filled with tears. Janaína squeezed Miguel's fingers and shook her head, crying even harder. When she was able to speak, it was not with anger or complaint. It was simple, almost a whisper, but so profound that it cut through the entire room. Thank you for not giving up." Alvaro closed his eyes. His face fell apart, as if those words had broken down a wall he himself had built. A tear rolled down his cheek quickly before he could hide it. Clara saw everything and felt her chest tighten. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't the end. It was something bigger. Forgiveness entering, clearing the heavy air, bringing light, where there had only been pain. At that moment, the three of them, mom, doctor, and nurse, were no longer people with different jobs. They were just broken people holding together the life of a child who still had so much to live for. Clara's heart was still racing, but now there was another weight inside her. The bag with his things in the corner of the room seemed to be calling her name. Slowly, she walked over to it, opened the zipper, and took out the blue stroller. The scratched plastic glistened in the cold hospital light, but to her it was as if it glowed with a life of its own. She returned to the stretcher, took a deep breath, and grabbed the toy with her gloved hands. Miguel's hand lay loosely on the small, fragile sheet, his fingers slightly bent. Clara bent down, lowered her voice, and spoke as if telling a secret. "This is yours, Miguel. Take good care of it." She placed the toy in the palm of the child's hand. For a moment, she was afraid it would fall, but no. His fingers moved slowly and closed around the toy. It was a very slight squeeze, almost nothing, but enough to fill the room with an inexplicable warmth. Clara put her hand to her mouth, trying not to cry. Her eyes filled with tears, and she let out a small sob. The knot she had kept hidden for years, that she had carried since she lost Gabriel, began to unravel. "That's it. Hold on tight," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now you're staying." The monitor confirmed it. The numbers were rising slowly and steadily. Each beep sounded louder, more alive. The child was coming back. Clara rested her forehead on the edge of the stretcher, closed her eyes, and let the tears flow. They weren't just for Miguel. They were also for the child she couldn't save. But now, in some mysterious way, the two were united in that gesture. On one side, the child was returning. On the other, the mother was finally finding peace inside. One question kept ringing out, striking the hearts of everyone who was there. Was it a miracle? Was it science? Was it love? Maybe it was all of those things together. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was right in front of them. Miguel was warm, breathing, with his hand clenched around a blue toy car, clinging to life with the strength of a little bird. She left the room slowly, as if crossing an invisible border. The hallway was lit as usual, smelling of alcohol as usual, but nothing felt the same. The sound of footsteps, the distant echo of a stretcher being pushed toward the cold light of the lamps. Everything seemed different. She leaned against the wall and let her body drop a little until she felt the firm floor. She took off her mask and breathed. The air entered heavily, then more gentler. A long sigh, as if for the first time in many years, she could truly breathe. She looked around. It was the same hospital, the same white walls, the same closed doors, the same clocks marking the routine, but inside her, nothing was the same. "I'm not the same anymore," she murmured, her eyes filled with tears. Clara remembered the scalpel suspended in the air, the minute frozen on the clock, the crumpled note, the blue cart, the music, Miguel's hand squeezing hers. She remembered everything together, as if it were an entire movie playing in seconds. She closed her eyes, discreetly wiped her face, and spoke only to herself. "I'm going to listen more to what cannot be measured." It wasn't an empty promise. It was a decision. She knew that protocols save lives, but she also knew that life cannot be measured only in numbers or reports. Sometimes life asks for silence. It asks for a glance. It asks for instinct. It asks for heart. At that moment, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Alvaro was coming toward her with his gown unbuttoned and his face tired, but different. He was no longer the same rigid doctor as before. He stood in front of her, took a deep breath, and said, "Clara, I'm going to set up a commission to review the protocols for death. No rush with death." Clara opened her eyes in surprise. "You're really going to do that?" He felt her firmness without hesitation. "Yes, and I want you to be the first voice on that team." Clara was silent for a moment. The tears returned, but now they were warm and light. Not from pain, but from a new beginning. She looked him straight in the eye. There was no more fighting, no more barriers, only recognition. Two professionals who had found each other, not in the manual, but in life. Alvaro held her gaze and, without needing further words, made it clear that this was a new beginning for both of them. Clara took another deep breath, feeling that different air, and gave him look in her eyes. The look of someone who bears scars, but also hope. Janaína was still crying when she let go of her son's hand for a moment and turned to Clara. She didn't think about it. She didn't hesitate. She just hugged her tightly, one of those hugs that squeeze and heal at the same time. "When he grows up," she said, her voice broken but full of certainty, "I'm going to tell him who held him here." Clara closed her eyes and hugged her back. In that embrace, mother and nurse found each other as equals, two women who knew the weight of loss and the strength to keep fighting. The camera slowly zooms in on the stretcher. Miguel's little hand is still firmly clutching the blue toy car. The old scratched toy, now a symbol of something greater, the life that returned, and the peace that finally found its place. And now, I want to talk to you, the ones watching this. If you were in Clara's place and in Janaína's place, what would you do? Would you have the same courage and the same forgiveness? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'll read every single one, because this story doesn't end here. It continues with each of your answers. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more miracle-filled stories and turn on notifications.